The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Chris Stevens.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wish to raise the issue of Department of Work and Pensions office closures, but before I do wish to bring to the attention of the House my register of members' interests, and in particular my role as Chair of the PCS Parliamentary Group. As you will be aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, this issue, and I believe that you have indeed yourself made representations on behalf of your constituents who are employed in the Department of Work and Pensions. This is an issue which affects DWP staff across these islands. Now, the Public and Commercial Services Union is, of course, the largest trade union in the civil service, representing 180,000 members, and it represents workers throughout the civil service and government agencies, including 50,000 members employed by the Department of Work and Pensions. And they are concerned, as members across the House are, at the Department of Work and Pensions announcement of the 17th of March this year, that over 40 of its processing sites are to close, which we believe has the potential of putting over 3,000 jobs at risk of redundancy. Now, there are three categories of processing site closures. The first one is where the site is closing and the work will not be consolidated anywhere in the vicinity, which I understand to be 13 sites. Where the site is closing, but work will be consolidated into an office that DWP have deemed as within the vicinity, which is 28 sites, and sites that were originally announced as transitional that will be retained in the short to medium term, but will remain badged and transitional, which is 8 sites. Now, despite the initial assurances given by the Department Ministers that an urgent question, which I secured, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real concerns we have are that the closures, we were told that the closures wouldn't impact frontline services. However, a further announcement of the 30th of March were for the closure of 5 job centres. And it's very concerning about this, because this seems to be the latest push by the Department of Work and Pensions to implement their network design strategy, which will put jobs and services at serious risk. And there is concern that these latest announcements could signal further job centre closures. We are clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, those of us in the PCS Parliamentary Group, that following the previous closures under the People and Locations programme, that these closures could have and will have a devastating impact on the services that staff provide and the local communities where the offices are based, and they are a serious threat to DWP staff jobs. On March the 17th, when the original announcement was made, there were 1,118 staff in processing sites that will close without their work being consolidated within the vicinity, and 7,341 staff in sites where the work is being consolidated into other offices. But the speed in which the department is operating and has moved to issue at risk of redundancy letters to staff across 25 of the 43 sites vindicates the concerns that many of us have that jobs will be lost as a result of these closures. Now, while some of the sites in the second category are seeing work moving into buildings that are very close by, for example, the Falkirk site and the Preston site, other offices that DWP have classed as being in the vicinity and so plan to move staff to are actually some considerable distance away. Like, for example, Madam Deputy Speaker, the proposal to move the Doncaster office to Sheffield, which you will be aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, is 22 miles away. In many of these offices where one-to-one meetings have taken place with members of staff, it's clear that many will not be able to move, and it is therefore certain that many DWP staff will be faced with the very real prospect of redundancy. There are 2 processing sites in Wales due for closure from a previous round of closures, and that has also had staff confirmed at the risk of redundancy as part of the 16th of June announcement, and that's because there are over 120 staff based across 2 sites who are unable to make the long journey to the proposed new office. The offices are closing in 2 tranches, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 16th of June, the Department of Work and Pensions announced that of the 29 sites in the first tranche, in 25 sites, a total of 903 staff were at risk of redundancy. And we believe that of the remaining 14 sites which are due to be closed on a slightly slower timeline, similar numbers of staff are likely to be at risk of redundancy. And I'll give a no adjournment debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, would be complete without an intervention from the Honourable Member for Strang.
Adjournment debates don't usually come this early in the day, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you and I know, but nonetheless we're very pleased. Can I first of all congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for Glasgow South West in coming forward with this? He's assiduous when it comes to these issues, and I thank him for that. I think all of the House should thank him for it, by the way. But hailing from a rural constituency with intermittent public transport as well as intermittent internet and mobile service, centralisation or closure service is never a good suggestion for isolated people. I know the Honourable Gentleman is referring to towns, but would the Honourable Member agree and call for the Minister to consider, where it's possible, and I think it's maybe a suggestion for perhaps to consider satellite offices in rural areas that we live in, but also in the centralised urban areas that the Honourable Gentleman has referred to?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that intervention, because I have family members in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, as he knows, and so I'm well aware of his constituency. And I think he raises a very important point, about satellite offices, but also home working. We were told that home working was a suggestion, but it seems now that the government want to force people away from working at home into offices. Only now the government are now closing these offices. So there does seem to be some mixed messages going on from the government, but I do thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, and he makes a very important point, and I hope that the Minister will perhaps respond to that. Madam Deputy Speaker, on the 16th of June, a voluntary redundancy scheme was offered to those staff on the 25 sites identified as being at risk of redundancy. Most of these closures are based on plans that were originally drawn up in 2016 and announced in 2017, and they are seriously out of date. The sites chosen for closure have, according to the Department, been selected after not just looking at the condition and suitability of buildings, but after considering the potential impact of taking work out of locations that score more highly for economic deprivation. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, many of these closures do not seem to make a lot of sense if their impact on the local economy has been taken into account. Many of these closures, Madam Deputy Speaker, are in areas of economic deprivation that can hardly afford to lose good quality public sector jobs. For example, 29 of the 41 processing sites are in constituencies that have higher than the national average claiming rates, and 18 of the 33 England office closures are in constituencies rated in the top 100 most deprived constituencies in the country. I don't call that levelling up, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my friend, my honourable friend for Glasgow North East, has done a survey of businesses next to the Springburn site, which is earmarked for closure. And that makes interesting reading, and I will just at the moment just identify some of what's been identified in that community impact assessment. That many businesses where staff in the Springburn site use the off sales, obviously buying perhaps a bottle of wine before they go home for the evening. Chinese restaurant next door all have concerns about the closure of that office. The local florist is very concerned because, again, staff would use that service. The local pharmacy would be concerned about the closure of that service. The local butcher has made representations about the concern of that of the Springburn office, and that is the very real impact, just on Springburn alone, that it would have on the local economy in relation to these office closures. But it seems, Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps, and perhaps the Minister can confirm this, that the overriding reason for many of these closures is because the Department of Work and Pensions itself has let the buildings they are located into fall into major disrepair. I want to, Madam Deputy Speaker, turn to the concerns about the lack of opportunities to redeploy staff. Now, when offices are closing, ministers sought to assure and members of this House that staff will be redeployed elsewhere in the Department of Work and Pensions or in other government departments wherever possible. Furthermore, the potential for redeployment elsewhere in the civil service has also become less likely after the Government announced through the press on the 13th of May, without consultation with staff or the trade unions, that it plans to cut 91,000 civil service jobs. The Department of Work and Pensions decision not to make permanent thousands of staff on fixed-term appointments is a blow to, I think, the staff as well as service delivery. Under the recent permanency exercise for 12,000 work coaches who had joined the department in fixed-term contracts, only 9,300 have been offered permanent posts. And perhaps the Minister can tell us that those who are not in the 9,300, whether they will be offered permanent employment within the Department of Work and Pensions. Because not all of these have been offered to staff in the preferred workplaces, so they face making significant journeys if they want to continue their employment with the Department of Work and Pensions. The current position is that 1,400 full-time equivalent staff are on a waiting list but are being told that their contracts will end on the 30th of June 2022. Other full-time equivalents have been put on the waiting list and selected out of the process despite joining the Department of Work and Pensions on fair and open competition. If this position does not change, this will lead to significant shortfalls in staff within job centres and within DWP offices who are facing staff reductions of up to 5,000. And this will lead, Madam Deputy Speaker, to increased workloads, place greater pressure onto existing staff and have a detrimental impact on the services the public receive from the Department of Work and Pensions. We believe it makes no sense to be threatening experienced staff with redundancies when the department needs more staff, not less, to deal with higher workloads. And if these closures and jobs cuts are allowed to go ahead, then we face the absurd prospect that staff will be made redundant in one area while recruiting new staff in another to do the same job. That would be both costly and inefficient. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to turn to the issue of the buildings. The Department's aim is to rationalise, as I understand their aim is to rationalise the Department of Work and Pensions estate, taking into account things like hybrid working, but also to make offices fit for the future and to consider the green agenda as they review existing offices. We're told that all offices will be looked at, including job centres, and they want to ensure that everyone is working in an office that's of good quality. The employer's belief seems to be that much of the DWP's existing estate is no longer fit for purpose, and they will look at to either exit sites that are no longer suitable, relocate into new premises within the vicinity where they want to maintain a presence, overhauling some sites and closing sites where they believe the Department of Work and Pensions no longer needs to be located. The Department of Work and Pensions seems to believe that having fewer, bigger buildings is a more efficient way of running the department. But as we've heard from the intervention from my honourable friend from Strangford, that is not necessarily always going to be the case. However, many of the processing sites are based in buildings that DWP will still operate from. For example, where job centres remain in the same location, such as Doncaster, which is a site that could easily accommodate 300 plus staff, that the Department of Work and Pensions see as the minimum number to make a building viable. It will not be possible to sublet parts of the buildings that they will be vacating, so we question the sense in making experienced staff redundant only for part of the empty office space they have vacated to potentially become unused. One such example is in Gloucester, Cedar House, where one part of one floor is being vacated and over 40 staff who are unable to move to Worcester have now been identified as at risk of redundancy. So the Department ministers have claimed that the estate programme is in support of the Government's commitments on sustainability and net zero carbon. However, these plans will likely lead staff having to travel further to work as a result, so they could lead to more carbon emissions. I think, again, a point that the Honourable Member for Strangford would no doubt agree with, given his earlier intervention. It's also worth considering that the Department of Work and Pensions is not totally vacating many of the buildings in question, but has not said whether it plans to invest in making these buildings more energy efficient in the future. There is little evidence that the Department of Work and Pensions is doing anything to improve the rest of its estate. Much of the remaining estate is either unsuitable and unsustainable. We also have concerns, Madam Deputy Speaker, that not all of the buildings that DWP proposes to move staff to will be able to accommodate the numbers. And that now brings me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the issue of equality impact assessments. The restrictions on the equality impact assessments have now been lifted by the Department and are now available in the House of Commons library. But we have concerns that the equality impact assessments have identified there will be groups disadvantaged by the closures, but said very little about what they are doing to mitigate these impacts. These equality impact assessments were produced before the one-to-one interviews were conducted with staff facing the closure of their offices. It's likely that this process would further confirm the impact on people with protected characteristics. Women form a significant majority of the DWP workforce, on some sites constituting over 75%. There are no tangible mitigations offered in these documents that are likely to compensate for the clear detriment that women face from this office closure programme. People with disabilities, particularly if they impair their ability to travel to work, are likely to face disproportionate impact from office closures, as they will have to travel in some cases by making significant journeys further to work. The Department of Work and Pensions aims to mitigate the impact on disabled staff by exploring reasonable adjustments and flexible working arrangements. However, this is unlikely to provide sufficient mitigation, as the Department of Work and Pensions is currently not prepared to fully embrace working from home as a redundancy avoidance. And again, I'm sure people in Strangford, for example, or in other rural parts of these islands have benefited, and government departments have benefited from staff working from home, particularly those in the Department of Work and Pensions, where there was a huge increase in the number of universal credit claimants, for example. I think that DWP staff should be congratulated for the work that they've done during that period, and not now have to face their offices being closed and the prospect of redundancy. In some sites, Madam Deputy Speaker, for example in Hackney, there is a high percentage of staff from ethnic minority backgrounds. The proposed solution inevitably means longer travel at greater expense if they're able to relocate, which is a clear detriment for those impacted. In Blackburn, 36% of staff have been identified as being ethnic minority. Despite this, the DWP's analysis is that there's no evidence to suggest that they will be negatively impacted. And certainly it is our belief that that analysis is flawed. There are high proportions of part-time workers who are more likely to be carers. In many of these sites, again, there is little by way of mitigation offered to these workers. Now, we are aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions and the Permanent Secretary invited a limited number of staff to attend a meeting on the 26th of May, which they addressed with the presentation of the Departmental Plan 2022-25. Once again, the Department of Work and Pensions and Ministers have gone to staff without proper engagement with the trade unions. And I would certainly suggest that there should be full and proper consultation on the detail of that plan with trade unions that have huge implications for trade union members, DWP staff and the public which they serve. The plans identify a cut in funding for staffing resources, whilst at the same time introducing more work. And it's certainly our belief that the plan suggests a 12% cut in funding for staff over the 3-year period. That plan also suggests an increase in payments for universal credit, legacy benefits and pensions of 16%. That can only mean more work for less staff. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, certainly we would want to see the Department of Work and Pensions take a realistic approach to a likely surge in demand for services, as the impact of the war in Ukraine and the fallout from the pandemic is devastating the economy. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope that the Minister will be able to answer many of the points that we've raised today on these, this office closure programme and the concerns that we have for the staff who deliver a great service. And I hope that the Minister will be able to confirm that there's no redundancies for these staff in the Department of Work and Pensions. Thank you.